Thank you, everyone. We're going to have some fun with our webinar. So let's talk about those 4 uniques and what sets us apart. So Fourlane is the #1 QuickBooks Enterprise team. We have been since 2010, and we are so proud of everyone on our team. This year, we are able to say that we have 8 of the top 100 pro advisors on our team. Last year, we had 2 of the top 10 pro advisors on our team. So we are just continuing with that and really making sure that we are educated, we continue our partnership with Intuit, and continue to give them feedback on products, not only for our clients, because we are listening and hearing them, but for our team as well. We also have QuickBooks, NetSuite, Xero, and Acumatica VAR. So we're able to support you, and we're able to find the right product for you. A lot of times people think QuickBooks is mom and pop shops. They are so wrong. Do not listen to those people. If they only knew how to use QuickBooks correctly and they knew what it could do for companies, they would not say that. Or I hope they would not say that. But we always want to ensure that we are right fitting you and we are able to put you into the right product that you need today. And if we ever need to go to that next step of the ERP, we can continue to help you and support you. So you're not having to start over with a different company that doesn't understand where you came from and where you are today. We are experts in accounting and software. This is something that I really like to ensure that people understand. So when we're talking to you about things, just like today, we're going to talk about the file size. It's not only something that is important to the IT team, but it's also from an accounting perspective really important as well. And so you get one person that really is giving you advice on 2 areas, accounting and software, not just accounting people talking accounting and IT talking IT, right? So you're getting that combination of both and that perspective. And being the strategic partner for change management has just been super helpful for our clients. We know that if we're changing workflows, if we're going from Excel to 100% inside the system, you know, that is sometimes difficult. And we understand that, you know, change is not easy for everyone. So we want to ensure that we can be your partner. We can be here to help you to understand what's coming next, to be able to ensure that we're thinking about everything. If we're changing softwares, if we're moving into QuickBooks, moving into Acumatica, those are things that we have gone through. It is not our first time. And so for clients that have never gone through those, we want to be that partner for you. And we want to be able to get you there very, very successfully. All right. So file size. Why is this important to me? Well, today we're going to talk about the product information window. Well, first of all, how do we get to that product information window? And then file size, total transactions, total targets, total links. These are all things that relate to our file size and the limitations within the database and why I need to even know any of these things. So hopefully you are able to see my QuickBooks sample file, lovely and trusty sample files. We absolutely love those. So I have the product information window open, but how did I get here? So if we are on a keyboard and we press our F2, that F2 button opens up the product information window. There may be some people out there saying, I don't have the F2. So Control-1, at the same time, Control-1 will also open up our product information window. So this guy is our friend. It is a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about the database and all the things that we've got set up and we're using, it can tell us 1,000,001 things, right? But we got to understand what that means. So our very first thing that I do want to just make sure that I point out is up here in the product at the very top corner, it's going to tell you which version of QuickBooks you are on. So you can see that we're in QuickBooks Enterprise Solutions and the Accountant Edition, but this is where you can find that, right? Our license number, product number, all those things. Okay, so getting that kind of out of the way, I want to make sure that we are focused today on this area here. And hopefully you're able to see my screen, my mouse with the file size. So this sample file is pretty low, right? I mean, 42K, not big, but there have been some super big, large files that have come through my desk, through my client base, and it is really, really important because our file size is basically telling us that we have room for growth, or we are starting to reach the limitations within the database. So QuickBooks Enterprise, the database can go to a gig, gig and a half before we start experiencing issues. If we're in lower versions of desktop, those limitations, so for Pro and Premier, it's about 250K, right? Where we can start experiencing problems. Typically, we would recommend to upgrade, at that point. There's a much bigger space when we are in enterprise. There's a ton of other things that we can do and features, but if our file size is getting close to that gig, we could start experiencing things like, random shutting down, crashing, reports on a quick report giving me information that's different than what's on my balance sheet. It's really hard to explain, but that file size could be the reason why we're getting some of those random things, right? So what adds to my file size? Well, our total transactions, and in this sample file, we only have 852 transactions. So these transactions are going to add to my file size. But behind each transaction is a thing called total targets. So our targets behind each entry, and I'm just going to give an example. So I'm opening up a sales order, and a sales order is a non-financial posting transaction. So it does not hit our financial statements. It does not hit our general ledger. But what it does do for you who might be using like sales orders, right? It gives us a lot of data that if we're managing inventory, we really, really want to have this data, right? So it could be a necessity. But every time I put in a sales order, all of the lines, right? All of my items, and my items are tied to GL accounts. Right? I have targets. So these targets, so these amounts that are hitting, so that it's not financial posting, but it's still hitting our database, these are what make up our transactions. Even this 0, okay? So if I am a company where I enter in things like notes at an item level, it is still going to represent a 0, which is going to add targets to our file size. Okay, so let's go back to the product information window. We see that out of my 852 transactions, I have total targets of 5,101. That is going to make my file size larger. So I don't have a lot of transactions that are in my file, but my transactions have some data in them. It's not just a one item data, right? I have multiple items within my data, okay, within those transactions. So when I add transactions and I add a bunch of information on those transactions, that is going to increase my targets, and in return, that is going to increase my file size, okay? I have an example that I want to show and I want to bring up because this is a relatively small sample file, right? And so this screenshot, which I know might be hard to see for some of us. I'm gonna blow this up as much as I possibly can. So I hope that everyone can kind of see these numbers. So my file size is saying almost 3.2 gigs, right? 3,156,252. So out of this, I now see I am over my file size limitation within Enterprise. So what can I do? What is this telling me? So within QuickBooks, you do have the ability to make some decisions when my file size is too large. I can condense. I can condense my file. I can remove some data and be able to see that I have a cutoff date and all of the things prior to that cutoff date within a condense can be removed. One of the things that we do with our clients is we try to get at least 50 to 80% reduction when we go through this process. But this file size is so important because as we're monitoring our file and we're ensuring that we're watching it, right? If it is growing, then we should be going, ooh, we need to do something, right? We can remove our audit trail. Our audit trail is on every transaction. I almost went to that audit trail, but I might be here for a while. It is on every transaction. I'm going to go back real fast and just show everyone how I got there, even though I know we're not going through that today, but I'm on my sales order and I have this box, right, or my gray kind of information box on the transaction. And if I click that open on this tab, I have the customer information and transaction. Okay, if I click on this magnifying glass, then it pulls up the audit trail on that individual transaction, okay? And so this, right, is something that we see one transaction has been created, modified, and modified again. So that, if we think about on the back end of our database, how many times we go into a transaction and we make a modification, that audit trail is just compiling and compiling, and it's just been there forever, right? So why is that important? Because I can remove the audit trail and I can reduce my file size. Okay, so if I go back to my product information window and I look at the versions used on the file, I can see that the sample file, originally it started in 2020, right? My other screenshot that I had over here, this file goes back all the way to 2015. So let's think about all these transactions that have all this data in it. And all those times I've made modifications, that audit trail is growing and growing and growing. So by removing an audit trail, I can reduce my file size. When I remove transactions and I go through a condense, I can reduce my file size. Okay, and I do just want to make sure that I let everyone know, if you have any additional questions, please, please, please put those out here. If I can't get to those today, I will do my best. I mean, I will answer them, but I will do my very, very best to get to those today. All right, so the audit trail, right, removing that can reduce that file size. And when I do that, I can ultimately remain inside of QuickBooks Enterprise. I do not have to start a new company file. So option one to reduce that file size is go through the Condense, remove the audit trail, and we have a ton of clients that go through this process, you know, every 2 years. And we have a database review that will allow for us to forecast out 24 months in advance of when you are going to hit your file size limitations, so you can be proactive instead of reactive about this, okay? So what's that other option? The other option is starting a new file, right? If we look at this window here and we go back and we say, man, we've been in here since 2015. Potentially, it might be a good idea to let's take a look at how we have our system set up, maybe improve some workflows and start a new file. When we start a new file, that is giving us the lowest file size possible when we go through our proven process of a summary conversion. Because the way that we do this for our clients is we set it up so that they're getting the information that they need financially and open transactions, but they're not having everything brought over, right, from history, so that we have the next 25, 30 years to continue to grow, if that's how long we've been using our file, right? So when we add transactions, that adds targets, and targets increases our file size, okay? So one of the things that we can do is we can look within our workflows. If our workflows are creating copies of things, if our workflows, going back to the sales order, and this is just a quick example, but this sales tax, right, it is 0. I have a lot of clients that go in and on the bills, so I'll just go in and show this. On the bills, we may have, open up this extra one here. This is the last bill that was entered. We've got advertising expense. Now, probably not going to happen to a manufacturing supplier, but it's a sample file. So advertising expense is at 0. And there are preferences that can be set within vendors that basically say, right, always put to this, you know, it's pre-filling the account, right? And so sometimes people don't know that this is here. But what this does is this adds to my targets, right? I've got this test. It is creating a line. It's giving me no value, no financial value at all, but it is increasing my file size, okay? So the easiest way so that we can ultimately resolve and fix so we don't end up here again is looking within our workflows and identifying, am I making additional steps that is giving me no financial impact? If I don't need this information, then let's remove that from our processes. Now, I don't have any questions just yet, but I do want to make sure that we talk about if our file size is, let's just say 4 gigs. If our file size is 4 gigs and we can typically do a 50 to 80% reduction when we do a condense and optimization with our clients, right? And that's reducing the file size, cutting it off at a certain date, and removing those transactions, but keeping all the transactions that we have from the cutoff date to current, right? So if we do that, I have a 4 gig file, 50%. Alicia, I'm at 2 gigs, that's still over the size limitations, right? So the more years that we reduce, right, we remove, the more of a reduction we're going to have. What is the other thing that we got to look at? Again, the workflows there, right? Those workflows. We can also remove non-financial posting transactions. So if I have 2 years of transactions that I'm keeping from a Condense, we can go in and remove all the closed estimates, closed sales orders, closed purchase orders, and that will also allow for us to have a reduction. I have clients that say, hey, Alicia, I'm going to go ahead and gamble with my 4 gig file. I don't really want to go through a Condense, and I don't really want to start a new file. I like to gamble. I go to the casino, play that, penny machine. Just kidding. But I like to gamble. But I do not gamble when it comes to financials. That is one thing as a former controller that is so important to me when I want to come in and I have to come to work and I want to make sure that my file is going to open and I can rely on those financials. The thing that I have to do is monitor this file size and all these other things, my targets, my transactions, my workflows that are going to add to ultimately my file size. And that's why this should be very, very important and be something that we would put as part of our month-end close review and our system review. We would not go buy a brand new car and never change the oil. I mean, you could, but if you do, at some point that motor is going to blow up, right? It is the same thing when we are going through QuickBooks and we're investing in a software that is running our business, and we need that. We rely on that to be able to go get loans, to be able to make business decisions, right? To continue to grow, to pay our employees. We're processing payroll out of QuickBooks, right? This is why this is so important. So I know that we're getting close to our time. I want to make sure that I'm stressing enough the file size is just as important as the data we put in, because if we don't pay attention to this one day, right, it may not open. So we can press our luck as much as you want to take that on, but it does matter and it is important, and it allows for us to continue to keep our database and everything else working as smoothly as possible. Okay. All right. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. Oh, I do have some. Does inactivating customers and vendors reduce the file size? Unfortunately, no, it does not. So when I inactivate, that list information and those transactions are still there. So this list information, also in the product information window, the customers of 51, that is active and inactive. So those transactions cannot be deleted for those customers or that record if there's been transactions. So it does not reduce my file size. One of the things that is a big misunderstanding is if I have attachments and I do paperless workflows, sometimes people think, right, and the attachments would be this attached file. Some people think that if I do this, it's going to increase my file size. That is not correct either. QuickBooks makes a copy of that document and stores it in a attachments folder, so it does not increase file size. Okay. How did I get to that product information window? F2. So the F2 button on your keyboard. If you don't have F2, it's Control 1 at the same time, and it will open that up. When you remove the audit trail, you remove the audit trail as of the day you're doing it. You can't say only remove it for a certain period of time. Now within the condense, right, we can do both. We can condense and remove audit trail. And then it's 12:30. Okay, so I will follow up if I didn't get to your questions here. I do want to make sure that we go through and just talk about our next topic. So guys, thank y'all so much for all those questions. They were kind of all coming in at the end. But our next week's webinar is training on journal entries, consignment inventory, accounts payable tie out to the balance sheet, purchase order management worksheet, cash versus accrual reporting, and then we've got Notify with QuickBooks Enterprise. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you'll have a great day, and we will see you next week. Thank you.